Tractate Bava Batra, page 34. We start with 33b, 7 lines from the top of the page. Reuven and Shimon, this is the name of two people we mentioned in the past several days who have a disputation. Reuven, he said, here are two witnesses that I inherited this estate, belongs to me, what are you doing in my property? Shimon said, no, I purchased it from you, I hold it for many years, I have a documentation for that, I have two witnesses, and then Shimon could not find or declare that he didn't hold it because he didn't feel he needs it for more than 3 years. The witnesses said that he works and have the estate only for 2 years, and as a result Shimon need to return the estate to Marakame, to Reuven. Hahuda Amar lechavrei, 7 lines from top of the page. Here is a fellow that Reuven approached Shimon and said, my Ba'ahara, what are you doing in my estate? It's mine. Amar le, Shimon said to Reuven, Shimon is the fellow that walks in the estate and involved with improvement the property, planted the tree, used the produce, etc. Amar le, minach zavni v'achalti ashnei chazaka. I purchased it from you. I have it for several years. The fact that I have this documentation, the contract, promissory note, or whatever needed, I hold it, but then I figured out I don't need to hold it more than 3 years, and therefore this is the reason why I don't have it. Azal, what did he do, Shimon? He brought witnesses that prove that he owns the estate in a sense of working it, planting it, have the produce, etc. However, the most he can reach is the witnesses that testified he had this property for how long? For 2 years. So Amar Rav Nachman Hadra Ar. Rav Nachman was a well-known, as we said many times in the Talmud, the judge that they followed, strong voice and a high authority, and he said, yes, Shimon, with all due respect, we understand that you work hard in the property, you plant in the seed, you have a produce. However, since there is no proof that you hold it for total consecutive 3 years period by the evidence of documentation or the witnesses, the estate needs to return to Marakame, to the original owner who claimed that he inherited it from his ancestors. He have witnesses for that, and he needs to return to him. The Rishonim, the early sages, tell us that here is a huge chidush. What's the chidush here? It says that the merely fact that Reuven as Marakame is the first, the original owner, he can be a next door neighbor or can be a local peasant, local person, and he didn't ask for anything for those several years, for example 2 years. But the fact is that the estate returned to Reuven. Shimon needs also to complement it here for those produce that that he used, since there are witnesses that prove, and the court decision is to return the estate to Reuven. The Rashbam elaborated and said, first and foremost, we need to understand the whole idea of lack of act of objections from Reuven over the period of time doesn't make any difference in a sense of holding the estates or return or compensate Reuven for using the estate since it returns to him. But furthermore, he said that since Reuven brought witnesses that prove his ownership of that estate, so therefore Shimon, with all due pain that he planted seeds, that he have all this work done, he needs to compensate him, and you cannot say ta'anat migo. Ta'anat migo meaning he can say, look, I ate very little, I planning all this, did all this improvement in the state, I planning the the seeds, the rabbis came in and said, we impose upon him, which called Shvuat Heset, that he really purchased the estate. So Amar Rav Zvid, here we come in with another claim that that since Shimon, the one who needs to transfer the estate to Reuven, claim for whatever he consumed, produce, etc., the amount, the size, etc., we do believe him in that sense. Amar Rav Zvid, when Reuven challenged Shimon over his estate by original question, what are you doing in my property? Ta'an ve'amar leperot yaradati. He said, I descend to the estate in order to plant those produce. He said, I didn't claim that I purchased it, or in a sense have the transfer of ownership. He just said that I have a sharecropper agreement, which is called arisut. I have the right, the way that we agreed, that I have for a certain period of time the right to access and walk in the estate. So even though Shimon needs to return to Reuven the property, since he has no clear proof of his right over the estate, he cannot continue, Shimon, to use the produce against the owner, but backward ne'eman, which means that even the witnesses that he ate, consumed the produce, and his witnesses that that the estate is not belongs to him, as we said, Reuven and the witnesses that it's his, but he is basically deemed liable. So now the Gemara goes and explains the source, the roots for that ruling. Lav mi amar Rav Yehuda, Hayman denakit magla vetuvlaya. So he said that isn't that like Rav Yehuda rulings, if someone hold a magal in those days, that it was a tools they used to cut. The Rashbam said that when they need to go up in a palm tree, so they need to go and use it. It's called a kal. They use that rope and kal, C-U-L-L, to go up in a palm tree and put it in a basket, etc. ואמר ezil igderei ledikla diflanai lenavze diflanai lezabnei nihalei. So he says, I will go cull the dates from the date tree of so and so who sold it to me. So he said he is deemed credible that he has the right to do so. Think about it. You see someone nowadays take the key and go to a safe, or take a key and move a car, or take a key and open a storage house. What do you assume? You assume that that fellow have the right to do it. Can be a buyer, can be in this case, he is the agent of the owner to go up and cut the produce from these trees, because look at this, he holds these materials, you all have these tools, and we assume that basically you have the right, he sold it to him. So they said we deem credible for that, and the Bet Din, rabbinic court, allow him to go and cut the dates, as long as the owner did not demonstrate his objections to that, even is not necessarily the one who does the job have a proof for that. So what do you derive from that? There is an important concept that's called lo chatzif inish de gazar dikla de lav delay, or the gadar dikla de lav delay. We assume that a person doesn't have this audacity, that rudeness, brazen, that he will cull the dates of a date tree that is not his. The idea is that the Rashbam explains, after he collected those dates, so you assume that he have these rights that the owner give it to him. Now, the Rambam in Hilchot To'en V'Nit'an, chapter 9, he said, if one says, I'm going to gather the produce of so-and-so's tree, which he sold to me, so the rabbinic court does not prevent him from gathering the produce unless the owner challenges his claim. The way that the Rema said in Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat 137, the Rema hold that when this is promulgated publicly, whereas according to, so he have to let him do it, because that's the solely and only condition. But Rabbeinu, the Tur hold that that it's even follow, which we're going to study by Reb Chizkiah, that even he did it in private as well. But if one says, I'm going to cut down so-and-so's tree, so here the rabbinic court prevents him from doing so. But again, as we said, that's the way that Rambam and the Code, the Tur and others interpreted that halacha chanami the lo chatzif inish the lemechal pirei de lav delay. We compare it to here the case that we discussed of Rav Zvid, that the person is not so brazen, so rude, so chutzpahdik, right, to consume produce that it's not his. So the Gemara challenged that, said, Yacha, if that's true, so ar'a nami, so it should be the land as well, which means that one should be credible when it's come to a state. So why we said that it's only when it's involved the chezkat shalosh shanim, the right of the 3 years. So as we said, there is a Khatam Sofer and the Rema, Rabbeinu Moshe Iserlich, the 1550, the interlineary interpretation of the code, that said that it's a discussion if this claim of lo chatzif inesh, that the person cannot be so brazen, is that applicable to our days. Why? They bring a proof in the case of married woman, said to her husband, you divorced me. And he said, I never did it. So in a Talmudic time, we assume her ne'emenet, we assume that she's saying the truth, that he divorced her. Why? Because we said that at that time, Isha einam ma'ezet, the wife would not be so brazen against her husband. However, the Rema hold that in our days, as the Mishnah, by the end of Tractate Sotah, tells us that in the Mashiach's time, in our days, chutzpah yazgeh, the audacity, the chutzpah, the rudeness, is going high rise. So therefore, they say that it is possible that wife lie, that the person said things that is not true. So therefore the Khatam Sofer said that the ta'ana, the claim, gerashtani ne'emenet, that she is deemed credible, you divorced me, it's in a Talmudic time, but in nowadays it's it's a total different story. He go further and said, the rabbis tells us that the reason the Chorban Bet HaMikdash, the destruction of the temple, one of the reasons it's because shehe'emidu divreihem al din Torah, that they go by the dry, strict, myopic interpretation of the law, the square-minded rigid interpretation of the law. And one of the thing is al divrei Torah, dinei Torah, that unfortunately things change. And you see it as the Rama mentioned, as well as the Khatam Sofer, that today the way people act and behave, and unfortunately, yes, lie in court, it's unfortunately common. So therefore, this claim of lo chatzif inish, that the person should not be brazen to behave such a thing, to take these utensils and go on a tree and start walking while it's not his, is no longer, in a sense, applicable in our days. Anyway, it's a heavy discussion. So the Gemara said, Ar'a amrinan le achvei shtarach. When it's come to the land, we said to him, show your bill of sale if you indeed purchase it. So the Gemara asks, Yache peire nami. So if that's the case, so the term of the produce as well, let him be deemed credible only if he can produce documentation of that support his claim. So the Gemara said, Shtara lefeirei lo avadei inshei. The Gemara said it is not common for people to write documents to establish the right to consume product alone, and one can therefore claim to have consumed the produce based on an oral agreement. Another story. Hauda Amar le lechavrei ma'ibait ba'ayara. Reuven said to Shimon, what are you doing in my property? Amar le minach zavnit ve'achalti ashnei chazaka. The same story. I purchase it from you and I consume it for those require 3 years for presumption of ownership. Here is a different situation. He has a witness that proved that he consumed it for 3 consecutive years. However, it's only one witness. And as you know, we need to have 2 in order to make it happen. So the question is, can we compare these to other cases that we said that a person hold it for a certain period of time, and you said that it's enough. So Savura Banan Kamei de Abaye. So the rabbis hold, meaning the disciples, the students of Abaye hold. Lemeimar Hainu Naska de Rabbi Abba. Naska is a piece of silver or gold that Rabbi Abba hold. De'ahu gavra de nachataf naska mechavrei. So it was a fellow that grabbed, snatch a piece of a cast metal, silver metal from another fellow. Ata lekamei de Rabbi Ami. So Shimon, who was basically robbed from Reuven, he came to claim against Reuven, who forced out this metal coin from him. Havayativ Rabbi Abba Kamei. At that time, Rabbi Abba was the students of Rabbi Ami. He was sitting there. Tosfot said the opposite in 34, but anyway, and he said, so it was one witness who testified that it was in fact snatched from him. The one who snatched it said to him, it is true that I snatched it, but guess what? It wasn't his. It was snatched because I owned it. So there is a concept we learned several times, that when it's come to metaltelin, we hold ownership kol shetachat yado, as long as the person hold it. It's a famous story about great Rabbi Diskin. It was a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Binyamin Diskin, and it was 2 parties, let's call them name, Reuven and Shimon, who left him large sum of money to be kind of, not a bank, but in those days it's like trustworthy treasurer that hold the money for them. And time passed by and something happened between the two, and they called to have some type of din Torah, like arbitration or something like that between the two. So they scheduled it for the next day. All of a sudden, in the late evening before that session, one of the party, let's say Shimon, came to Rav Nezikin and he said, "Oh, I already talked to Reuven and he agreed that you should give me the money." Remember, this is before the era of telephone and text and email and things like that. So obviously Rabbi Nezikin was a very shrewd person. He said to him, "What do you want me to do now? Reuven came to me at lunchtime several hours ago and said the same thing. He said, I reconcile with my other partners, with you, and I want the money." So he interpreted that the Rebbe already gave the other partner the money. So he says, he starts screaming and says, "What do you mean? He has no right you have no right to give him the money if you didn't hear me agree to that. How dare you to give him the money without my consent?" So the rabbi looked at him and says, "You didn't hear me. I didn't say I gave him the money. I just said that he asked what you're asking now. He asked and he said that you agreed." In other words, the rabbis imply that you are lying, right? That it can be that I'm going to do something without both partners at the same time consent to something, show his rudeness in a nice way. Anyway, so Amar Rabbi Ami challenged how basically we can hold this type of case. Page 34, Heichei nidainuha dayanei lehai dina. So how basically the judge pursued his judgment? Because the rabbis have several reasons to think, in one hand, not to implement all the rulings. If they were to order the one who snatched the metal to pay for it, that will not be the right ruling. Why? Because there are no witnesses who saw him snatch, and the court does not force payment based on the testimony of one witness. Lishalem leikatrei sahadei lifterei yikachatzada. But in order to exempt him, you have a problem, because you have one witness that testified clearly against him. Lishtava. So how about if you impose upon him to take an oath? Ha'amar michataf chatfa. But he said that it was in fact snatched. V'kevan de'amar dechatfa, since he said that he snatched it, and there is no proof that it is his, havalei kegazlan. So we treat it like a robber, and therefore the rabbinic court does not allow a robber to take an oath. That's basically the whole concept of ta'anat migo. You see it here clearly, and you see in the Ritva and many other mefarshim discussion how far you go with ta'anat migo. The late Rabbi Kanievsky, the Kilot Yaakov in Siman Kafhei, have a big malach on that. But anyway, Amar lehu Rabbi Abba, have mechuyav shvu'a, the one who is liable to take an oath, who is unable to take an oath, she'eno yachol yishava, v'chol hamuchayav shvu'a she'eno yachol yishava meshalem. So if you have a case like that, that one who's basically needs to take an oath, for all kind of force of circumstance, he cannot take an oath, so therefore he liable to pay. So that's the whole mindset, that the case of Rabbi Abba, which is very similar, because since the possessor is unable to take an oath to refute the witness, and he concede that he profited from the land for those years, he should have to pay for his consumption of the produce over that period of time. Abaye said that you cannot juxtapose the two scenarios. Why? This is the way Abaye teach to his disciples. He said, Amalu Abaye midame. You can't compare the two cases. Hatam sahada le'oru'ei ka'ate. Ki ate acharina ba'adei mapkina minei. Over there in Rabbi Abba case, the witness is coming to undermine the position of one who snatched the metal. So this can be seen from the fact that when it will be the case that another witness comes to court and testified with the first witness, we should take away the piece of metal from the one who snatched it. By contrast, here in the case of the individual who brought one witness attest of his profiting from the land, the witness is coming to support the possessor. Said Hatam sada le'urui ka'ate ki at acharina ba'adei mapkina lemina achal sayua ka'ate ki at acharina mukmina lebeyadei. So he said that when another witness will come to court and testify that the first witness, we will establish the land of his possession. So what you see here, the whole concept of one ed, of one witness that come in before us, does not render the one who profited from the land liable to take an oath. The Rashbam in Ilchot To'en V'Nit'an, chapter 4 said, I'm reading from Rabbi Steinsaltz's Koran edition, the translation of the Rashbam. If one witness observes someone snatching a piece of silver from another, and the one who snatched it admitted that he did so, but claims that it was actually his, he is subject to the halacha of one who is liable to take an oath, but is unable to do so, and he is liable to pay. That's basically the view of Rabbi Abba, and you see it also in the code Choshen Mishpat 75 and 364. Further on, if Reuven profited from a field, consuming his product, and Shimon claimed that Reuven stole it from him, and Reuven replied that he had purchased the field and profited from it for the years necessary for establishing the presumption of ownership, but was unable to bring two witnesses to substantiate his claim, Shimon takes an oath of incumbent that he neither sold nor gave the field to the possessor, and is giving the field. Reuven takes an oath that he does not owe Shimon anything of the produce, and he is exempt from payment. You see it more in the Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat in 145. Ela, so Abaye elaborate and explain when challenge of ownership of land is really compared to that Naschad de Rabbi Abba. So he said, Ela idamya had de Rabbi Abba. If you want to juxtapose in a sense of make some analogous, some comparison to a case such as this, so he said, idamya had de Rabbi Abba lechad saada uletartei shnei ulfirei. So you can compare it to a case of one witness, and he testified that someone's profiting from the land for 2 years, and the comparison is in terms of payment for the produce that he consumed. In terms of the consumption of the produce, 2 witnesses will have rendered the possessor liable to pay. The consumption of the produce for only 2 years does not establish the presumption of ownership, and consequently one witness renders him liable to take an oath, since he himself claimed that he profited from the land as the witnesses testified. So he cannot take an oath to contest this testimony, and therefore he will have to pay for the produce. Page 34b, another story. Today we have many stories. Hahu arba. So here it was either Rashbam said a boat that two people were quarreling over. The Rimibgash, the Meiri, the Ritva said that neither one of them is really the owner, but they have a mintzu alei beitrei, that they have a quarreling over that boat, that ownership. Here is the fight. Hay amar didihi, v'hay amar didihi. Every one of them said it's mine. So what do you do now? So if one of them obviously brings witnesses that he's the owner of that boat, that's different. Basically, if two parties bring witnesses that it's them, kol de'alim gvar, whoever is stronger, you go by that. But here, atachad binayu levedina, one of them, let's say Reuven, came before the court. V'amar tifsua, he said to the court, go and make sure that you seize it before the other parties take it from me or sell it. Ad maitina sahadei didihi, until I, Reuven, bring witnesses that this boat is mine. The question is, does the court has the right, rabbinic court has the right, just by a fellow come there and said, do something for me, is the court have the right to seize it? Tafsinan or not tafsinan? The court has the right to seize it or not? Because it can happen that they don't have any proof the ownership, and by court seizing it, one party losing his capability to access and hold the estates. Why? The rule is the moment the rabbinic court seize an entity, right? An object, movable object, and hold it, if you do not have a proof, it stays by the court. And you do not go again by kol de'alim gvar, whoever is strong take it. Or you can say that by the court seizing it, you give the access to one party to go ahead and do it. So how exactly you treat it? So the Rashbam elaborates and said the whole idea of court seasoning is depend upon another serious question, which is, we're going to discuss it further in the Gemarrah. If the Bet Din, the rabbinic court, sees it, following the concept of kol de'alim gvar, whoever is more brutal, forceful, demanding is the one who take it, and then you do not have sufficient evidence to show ownership, what exactly the court is going to do? They going to put it out? No. They're going to hold it? How? So the whole idea of now all of a sudden is part of the court possession is complicated. It's like, imagine a situation, you see a running motorcycle that's totally deserted in the middle of nowhere. Somebody called the police. The police come in, is no sign of evidence, is no numbers, is nothing, all ruined. No number of the motorcycle or the car, no numbers on the engine, it was erased, nothing, no evidence for anything. Find the running engine in no place. Turn off the engine and take it to the police court or the court, right? And now it's there for a half a year or 2 years. What do you do now? So basically in a secular world, you can sell it or use it for the police purposes and that's it, right? But here, since you have two parties that claim over that, by seizing it and having it, you make things sometimes more complicated, more difficult to resolve, or you don't want to show favoritism, as the Rashbam explains, to one party more than the others. And since it's not clear, what do? So the rabbis, the Amoraim, disputed. Rav Huna said, Tafsinan. Rav Huna said, since Reuven come to us and claim ownership and says, just give me a time, I bring the witnesses, so we shall seize it. Rav Yehuda Amar, Lo Tafsinan. Rav Yehuda said, no, you cannot seize it. Because again, do you want, the Rashbam said, and others, Tosfot and others, do you really want to get involved with this, since you do not have a clear evidence? So we try to bring it some type of proof from the story of the boat. Azal, remember the story of the boat? So one of the witnesses came in, one of the litigant came in, and he asked the court, the rabbinic court, to hold this boat until he bring witnesses that it's his. Velo ashkach sahadei, but he could not bring a proof that he is the owner. Amar lehu, apkua v'chol de'alim gvar. So he said to the court, release the boat, and whoever is stronger prevails. That's the one rule in the case there is neither evidence nor presumptive ownership for either litigant. So the Gemara asks, the reality is mapkinan or no mapkinan? So what do we say? You have such a complicated situation, the rabbinic court is really release it or not? Why? Because neither party at this point have no evidence, but things can change. And meanwhile, you open the door for people to basically, who knows, maybe kill each other or go by force against each other, who's not necessarily the one who pursue it, he has the really ownership of that. So again, disputation, Rav Yehuda amar lo mapkinan, Rav Papa amar mapkinan. Rav Yehuda said we will not release it, Rav Papa said we release it. As we said, Rav Yehuda hold, the moment that this movable property come to the rabbinic court, they cannot make it hefker, ownerless, in order to let it out, and somebody who's total unscrupulous and has no right can take it just by force. The Rab Meir Simcha and Chatam Sofer said that the whole problem is, do you open the door for people who just behave in such a manner to take things that it's not really there? But here the good news is we have psak halacha, and that's the conclusion. Vehilcheta lo tafsinan, and the halacha is that we do not seize property in case where ownership is not clear, is uncertain. Veheicha de tafas. For example, Nimukhe Yosef said, if the two litigants agree upon to have a court decision, and by mistake the court took ownership and seized the movable property for follow the request of one litigant, lo mapkinan. So if it happens by force of circumstances, not that the court wished to, but if it happens that they already followed the request of one party and they already seized it, so now it's too late. So now, as long as you don't have a proof that you own it, it stays in the property of the course. And the Rashbam said that basically what you see here, that we follow in two machlokot, in two disputations, they follow the Rabbi Yehuda, that makes sense in a way, that the moment the court take it and seized it, so you don't take it. So the rule is this: lechatchila, the first place, the court do not get involved if is no clear evidence for the court to seize it or to get involved. However, in hindsight, they did it for all kind of reason. It happens, they follow the request of one party, they did it, so you leave it for them as long as you don't have a raya. Tosfot said that one rule of Rabbi Yehuda did not depend upon the other. So you see here Tosfot goes in different ways. I would like to conclude with the word of the Rambam. I'm reading this beautiful translation of the Rambam from Koren edition. If two people claim exclusive ownership of a certain property and neither has possession of it, and one of them requests of the rabbinic court that they seize it, the request is not accepted. If the court did seize the property, either due to error of their part or due to a mutual consent of the parties, the court does not release it until one litigant proves his claim, or both parties, Reuven and Shimon, consent to its release. That's the Rambam Ilchot To'en V'Nitan, chapter 10, and Choshen Mishpat in Shulchan Aruch 139.